Hello, in this video we will talk about the special activity in Spark Workflow, the LDAP query activity, and explain how to use it to integrate your SharePoint workflow with the domain controller's Active Directory to retrieve and use the data in your workflow. Let's see how to do that. From the list that you want to add the workflow for, open Spark Workflow Designer. Create a new workflow. Set the workflow settings. If you are interested in how to create workflow in detail, you can watch the tutorial video listed in the description below. To integrate your workflow with the domain controller's Active Directory, Spark Workflow provides the LDAP query activity. You can find it under Integration Activities. Drag and drop the LDAP query activity and configure it. As we see here, you can change the default title or leave it as it is. Now we are going to specify the LDAP path. You can specify this field manually or by clicking on the FX button or by clicking on LDAP Explorer button. Select the path. Specify the username and password to connect to the specified LDAP. Set your LDAP query. You can specify this field manually or dynamically by clicking on the FX button. After retrieving the data, you have to store them in workflow variables to be able to use them in other workflow activities. So we need to create workflow variables to store the values. From the top ribbon, click on Variables. Then click on Add button. Enter the variable name and select the variable type. You can use the variable to store a single value or use the collection type to store multi-values in one variable. Repeat to add all the variables that you need. OK, now select the variable to store the value in. Type the LDAP property name to retrieve the data. Then click on Add. And the same for the email property. Then click Save. To see how the LDAP workflow activity works, we can use the history log to view the retrieved data. It will show the result in the workflow history list. Let's drag and drop the history log and configure it. Click on the FX button and select the workflow variables. Then click Save. Let's now publish and run the workflow to see how it works. Back to our list. Let's run the workflow for this item. From the three dots, click on Workflow and select the Workflow LDAP query. And here we are, this screen for Start Workflow. Click on Start button. As we see here, the workflow will get a single data record from the query retrieved data and show it in the history log. But if you want to get all users' names from Active Directory, you can create a workflow variable of type collection and use it in a for each activity, like this. Back to Workflow Design. From LDAP Query Settings, create a collection variable. Enter the variable name. Select the variable type, collection. Then select the variable to store the value in. Then type the LDAP property name. OK, now we are going to drag and drop the for each activity to retrieve all the data and store it in the workflow variable. As you see here, we have many options, like camel query, or collection, or text iteration. In this case, we are going to use collection. For each, as the activity loops through each value in the collection specified in the in field, the iterated value will be assigned to this workflow variable. This is very important for the activities inside the for each activity in order to consume this variable, and use it internally in their operations. The workflow variable type specified in this field must be compatible with the values stored in the collection in the field. This property will show only workflow variables of type collection, in order to specify the values collection to loop through the activity. Then click Save. Again, to view the result, we are going to use the history log activity. Drag and drop the history log activity inside the For Each activity and configure it. Let's now publish and run the workflow to see how it works. Back to our list. Run the workflow for this item. Select the item from the 3 dot. Click on the Start button. As we see here, the workflow gets all users' names from the Active Directory. We just watched how you can integrate your SharePoint workflow with LDAP, the domain controller's Active Directory, using Spark Workflow, and how you will be able to execute LDAP queries directly in a few seconds, store the retrieved data in workflow variables, and use them with other workflow activities. Follow us to learn more about advances used for SharePoint and Spark Workflow. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and if you have a comment, please write it down. Thank you.